Once upon a time, in the heart of ancient Greece, there existed a philosophy so controversial, so enticing, that it promised those who followed it an endless supply of pleasure, food, and even power. This philosophy was called hedonism, a way of life that celebrates indulgence above all else, that sees every desire as something worth satisfying, and every boundary as something meant to be broken. Imagine living a life where the only question you ever asked yourself was, does this make me happy? Where every decision, every action, was guided solely by the pursuit of pleasure. But what if I told you that this way of living, while incredibly tempting, hides a much darker side? What if the pursuit of endless pleasure isn't all it's cracked up to be? Today, we're going to peel back the layers of hedonism and reveal the truth behind the philosophy that promises everything you could ever want, and why, in the end, it might leave you with nothing. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a deep dive into the human condition, into the very desires that drive us all. We're going to explore the ancient roots of hedonism, see how it has shaped cultures, and understand why, despite all its promises, it can lead to emptiness. We'll look at real stories, from the ancient Greeks to the modern world, to understand the true cost of chasing pleasure without limits. We'll see the highs and lows, the allure of indulgence, and the destructive power of excess. But before we get started, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this content already, smash that like button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps this video reach more people who might need to hear this message. Plus, it makes me happy, and hey, isn't that what this is all about? Alright, let's dive in. To understand hedonism, we have to travel back in time to ancient Greece. There, among the philosophers who shaped Western thought, was a man named Aristippus of Syria. Aristippus was a student of Socrates, but unlike his teacher, he wasn't interested in abstract ideas of justice or virtue. No, Aristippus was interested in one thing and one thing only: pleasure. To him, the goal of life was simple: to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. He wasn't alone in his thinking. Across different cultures and eras, there have always been those who believe that pleasure is the highest good. In Babylon, for instance, we have records from the Epic of Gilgamesh that glorify feasting, dancing, and making merry as the ultimate purpose of human existence. In India, the ancient Charvaka school of philosophy claimed that wealth and pleasure were the only rational pursuits for a wise person. Aristippus took these ideas and made them the foundation of what he called ethical hedonism, unlike the wild indulgence of the mythical lotus eaters, who forgot all their responsibilities after tasting the sweet fruit. Aristippus taught that pleasure should be pursued with wisdom. He believed that it was not pleasure itself that was dangerous, but rather the inability to control one's desires. He famously said, "I possess, I am not possessed." The idea was that you could enjoy the pleasures of life without letting them control you. But let's be real, that's easier said than done. The line between enjoying pleasure and being enslaved by it is often razor thin. And this is why, throughout history, hedonism has been seen as a dangerous and even forbidden philosophy. Think about it, the allure of endless pleasure is powerful, but it comes with a cost. When you give in to every desire, you risk losing control. And once you lose control, you are no longer the one possessing pleasure, it possesses you. The deeper you sink into indulgence, the harder it becomes to climb out. It's a slippery slope, and many who have pursued pleasure without limits have found themselves in a pit of despair. From the very beginning, hedonism faced fierce opposition. Most major religious and philosophical traditions warned against the dangers of unrestrained pleasure. Christianity, for example, considers lust, gluttony, and greed to be sins. Buddhism teaches that the pursuit of sensual pleasures is a hindrance to enlightenment. The reason for this is simple: pleasure can be addictive. The more we indulge, the more we crave, and before we know it, we are no longer in control. Take the story of the lotus eaters from Homer's Odyssey. When Odysseus and his men arrived on the island of the lotus eaters, they were offered the sweet fruit of the lotus plant. The fruit was so delicious, so intoxicating, that those who ate it forgot everything else. They forgot their homes, their families, even their desire to continue their journey. They were trapped in a perpetual state of pleasure, unable to move forward, unable to escape. This story is a powerful warning about the dangers of unchecked pleasure. It shows us how easy it is to become trapped by our desires, to lose sight of everything else that matters. And it's not just an ancient tale. In our modern world, we see the same thing happening all the time. People become addicted to food, to alcohol, to drugs, to social media. They chase after pleasure, but instead of finding happiness, they end up feeling empty and lost. It's like being stuck on a treadmill, constantly running, but never getting anywhere. You think that next bite, that next drink, that next scroll through your feed will make you happy, but it never does. It just keeps you running in place, forever chasing something that's always out of reach. The pursuit of pleasure becomes a never-ending cycle, and instead of fulfillment, we find ourselves exhausted, drained, and unfulfilled. Here's the paradox of hedonism: the more you chase pleasure, the less you find it. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. The harder you try, the more it slips away. The Cyrenaics, who followed Aristippus, understood this paradox well. They argued that while pleasure was the highest good, it had to be pursued wisely. Otherwise, the pursuit of pleasure would lead to pain. Think about addiction. It often starts with something simple, a desire for pleasure. Maybe it's the pleasure of eating a delicious meal, the thrill of a new experience, or the comfort of escaping from stress. But over time, that desire grows. It becomes a craving, a need, and before you know it, you're no longer in control. The thing that once brought you pleasure now brings you pain. This is why many philosophers, including Socrates and Plato, were so critical of hedonism. They believed that a life dedicated to pleasure was ultimately empty. True happiness, they argued, could only be found through virtue, through the pursuit of wisdom and self-control. To them, pleasure was not the goal of life, but rather a byproduct of living a good and meaningful life. But Aristippus and the hedonists disagreed. They believed that pleasure was not only the goal of life, but the very essence of what it means to be human. They argued that denying our desires was unnatural, that we were meant to enjoy the pleasures of life. The key, they said, was balance. To enjoy pleasure without letting it control you. To embrace the beauty of life's simple joys while avoiding the pitfalls of excess. Fast forward to today, and we find ourselves living in a world that, in many ways, embodies the ideals of hedonism. We are constantly bombarded with advertisements that promise us happiness if we just buy this product, take this vacation, eat this food. Social media encourages us to share our most pleasurable moments, to present a curated version of our lives that is filled with joy and excitement. But behind the smiles and the selfies, many people are struggling. The pursuit of pleasure has left them feeling empty, anxious, and unfulfilled. The more they chase after happiness, the further away it seems. This is the dark side of hedonism that no one talks about. The promise of unlimited pleasure often leads to a life of dissatisfaction. It's a cycle of constant craving, never truly being satisfied, and always wanting more. Before I proceed, count yourself as an exception for making it this far into the video. You're clearly here for more than just the surface level. Now that you have shown how strong you are, let's make it till the end of the video. The modern world has made pleasure more accessible than ever before. We have unlimited access to food, entertainment, and experiences. But with that access comes the risk of overindulgence. Just like the lotus eaters, we can easily become trapped in a cycle of pleasure that leaves us disconnected from the things that truly matter. Relationships suffer, health declines, and the sense of purpose fades away. We scroll through our phones looking for that next dopamine hit, but it's never enough. The likes, the comments, the shares, they give us a momentary high, but then it's gone, and we're left wanting more. It's a vicious cycle, and it's one that leaves many people feeling empty and unfulfilled. The pursuit of happiness becomes a pursuit of likes, and in the end, it leaves us feeling more alone than ever. Not all hedonists were reckless in their pursuit of pleasure. In the 3rd century BCE, a philosopher named Epicurus emerged with a different take on hedonism. Unlike Aristippus, who believed in pursuing all forms of pleasure, Epicurus argued that not all pleasures were worth seeking. He made a distinction between natural and vain desires. Natural desires, like food, shelter, and friendship, were essential for happiness. Vain desires, like wealth, power, and fame, were often more trouble than they were worth. Epicurus believed that the key to a happy life was to seek simple pleasures and avoid unnecessary pain. He taught that true pleasure came not from indulgence but from contentment. To be satisfied with what you have, to enjoy the simple things in life, and to avoid the pain that comes from chasing after things that ultimately don't matter. That was the path to happiness. This idea of ataraxia, or tranquility, was central to Epicurean philosophy. It was about finding peace within yourself, rather than constantly seeking pleasure from the outside world. Epicurus himself lived a simple life, enjoying the company of friends, good food, and the beauty of nature. He believed that by keeping our desires in check, we could avoid the pain that often comes from overindulgence. Epicurus knew that pleasure was important, but he also knew that it wasn't everything. He understood that there was more to life than just chasing the next high. True happiness, he believed, came from within, from being content with what you have, from enjoying the simple things, and from cultivating meaningful relationships. He taught that the pursuit of pleasure should never come at the cost of our inner peace and well-being. The promise of unlimited pleasure is seductive, but it comes at a cost. Throughout history, we have seen countless examples of individuals who, in their quest for pleasure and power, ended up losing everything. The story of Gyges, a shepherd who found a ring that granted him the power of invisibility, is a perfect example. With this power, Gyges indulged in his every desire. He seduced the queen, killed the king, and took the throne. But his actions were driven by greed and lust, and they ultimately led to his downfall. This story, told by Plato in the Republic, serves as a warning about the dangers of unchecked power and pleasure. It shows us that the pursuit of pleasure, when taken to the extreme, can lead to moral decay and destruction. Gyges may have gained power, but he lost his humanity in the process. He became a slave to his desires, and in the end, those desires consumed him. In our own lives, we may not have a magic ring that grants us power, but we do have choices. We can choose to chase after pleasure at any cost, or we can choose to live with intention and balance. The pursuit of pleasure is not inherently wrong, but when it becomes the sole focus of our lives, it can lead to emptiness and regret. Think about it. How many times have we seen people who seem to have it all, but are still deeply unhappy? Celebrities, CEOs, influencers, they have wealth, fame, and power, but many of them struggle with addiction, depression, and loneliness. The pursuit of unlimited pleasure may seem like the path to happiness, but in reality, it often leads to the opposite. It leaves people feeling isolated, disconnected, and longing for something more meaningful. So, what can we learn from the hedonists of the past? Is it possible to enjoy the pleasures of life without falling into the traps that have ensnared so many others? The answer, I believe, lies in balance. Pleasure is a natural part of life. It's something we all seek, and it's something that can bring us joy and fulfillment. But it must be balanced with responsibility, with purpose, and with an understanding of what truly matters. The ancient hedonists like Aristippus and Epicurus had different views on how to achieve happiness, but they both understood that pleasure, when pursued wisely, could lead to a fulfilling life. The key is to know yourself, to understand your desires, and to be mindful of the choices you make. It's about enjoying the good things in life without letting them control you. In today's world, where pleasure is just a click away, it's more important than ever to find that balance. To enjoy the pleasures of life, but not to let them define you. To seek happiness, but not at the expense of your health, your relationships, or your sense of purpose. True happiness comes not from the endless pursuit of pleasure, but from the contentment that comes from living a good and meaningful life. So next time you're tempted to chase after the next high, remember pleasure is a part of life, but it's not the whole of it. There's more to life than just feeling good. There's meaning, there's purpose, there's connection. And that, my friends, is what truly makes life worth living. Thank you for sticking with me through this exploration of hedonism. If you've made it to this point, you're truly exceptional. To show me that you've watched until the end, comment the word tranquility down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this forbidden philosophy and whether you think the pursuit of pleasure is worth the risk. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of philosophy. Until next time, stay curious and stay balanced.